Hey everyone, and welcome to Whispered Histories. Go ahead and dim the lights, get comfortable, and let your mind drift. Tonight, we're going to float back in time. Not to a land of gallant knights and fairy tale castles. No, that's the version they sell you in the gift shop. We're going to the real medieval period, the one with less chivalry and a whole lot more mud, and smells, and a general, pervasive dampness that clings to everything. We're here to explore, in the most relaxed and sleep-inducing way possible, why you, with your modern sensibilities, your love of indoor plumbing, and your quaint attachment to not dying from a splinter, wouldn't last a single day. So take a deep breath, close your eyes, and let's begin our gentle descent into the grime and grit of the Middle Ages. Don't worry, it's all in the past, mostly so. Let's imagine you wake up, not in your bed, of course. That would be far too comfortable. You probably find yourself on a pile of straw on an earthen floor. If you're lucky, it's relatively clean straw. More likely, it's been there for a while, and you're sharing it with a delightful assortment of fleas, lice, and other tiny companions. An early wash was desirable, because these pests were a common problem, and rarely changed straw bedding was a paradise for them. You might find some temporary relief from these critters thanks to herbs like basil, chamomile, lavender, and mint mixed into the straw. But that's a small comfort. You open your eyes. The first thing you notice, besides the itching, is the darkness. Medieval peasant homes were notoriously dark and damp places. Windows were a luxury. If you had one at all, it was likely just a hole in the wall with a wooden shutter, which would have been closed all night to keep out the night. Glass was fantastically expensive, so that wasn't happening. The second thing you notice is the smell, though. The smell, it would be a complex bouquet. There's the earthy scent of the dirt floor, the mustiness of the damp straw, and the faint, sweet odor of rot from the thatched roof. But the most dominant aroma would be smoke. In the center of your one-room hut, a fire would be smoldering in a hearth. This was your heating and your kitchen. And since chimneys were a luxury reserved for the wealthy, the smoke would just linger. It would fill the room, stinging your eyes, before lastly making its way out of a hole in the roof. It's a miracle anyone could breathe in there. And you wouldn't be alone in the smoky, one-room hovel. The average peasant family lived in incredibly close quarters. But it wasn't just your human family. To protect them from thieves and the elements, the family's livestock often shared the living space. That's right. You wake up to the gentle lowing of a cow or the bleating of a goat, probably just a few feet away, penned off in a corner of the hut. The animal smells would mingle with the smoke and the damp, creating an atmosphere that, well, it's an acquired taste. Let's just say that, feeling the need to relieve yourself. There's no en-suite bathroom here. You'd stumble out of your hut into the gray morning light. Most people used outdoor privies or chamber pots, which were often just emptied into nearby rivers or streams, or even more simply, thrown into the street. The concept of sanitation as we know it just didn't exist. Towns and villages were unhygienic places, with animals roaming freely, and human and animal waste a common sight on the thoroughfares. So, your first task of the day would be to navigate this olfactory and physical minefield. Now, for your morning hygiene routine, you might be surprised to learn that medieval people didn't completely neglect cleanliness. It was common practice for just about everyone to wash their hands and face in the morning. This was usually done with a basin of water. If you were near a river, you might use that. Soap, made from animal fat and ash, was available, but it wasn't the fragrant, bubbly stuff we're used to. You could also clean your teeth, perhaps with a hazel twig or a piece of wool cloth. But a full-body bath, that was a rare event often reserved for special occasions. For most, a quick wash of the essentials was all that was on the agenda. Time to get dressed. Your wardrobe would be limited. As a peasant, you'd likely have 1 or 2 outfits, made of coarse wool or linen. The colors would be drab browns, grays, and undyed fabrics. Bright colors were expensive and a sign of wealth. Your clothes would be functional, designed for a life of hard labor, and probably patched and repaired many times over. Underwear, not really a thing for most people. A simple linen tunic would be your base layer. Feeling a bit peckish after all that, Let's talk about breakfast. Your meal would be simple and monotonous. A hunk of dark, heavy bread, likely made from rye or barley, would be a staple. This wasn't your artisanal sourdough. It was dense, gritty, and sometimes even contained stone dust from the grinding process. To go with it, you might have some pottage, a thick stew of vegetables, and grains that was a cornerstone of the peasant diet. It would be simmering over the fire, and leftovers would just be added to the pot the next day. And the day after that, meat was a rarity, reserved for special occasions. You might have some cheese or an egg if you were lucky. And to drink, not water. Water was often contaminated and considered unsafe. Instead, you drink ale or beer. Even children. It was low in alcohol and a safer source of hydration than the local river. Now, with your nutritious breakfast out of the way, it's time to start your day. And for about 90% of the population, that meant one thing: work. The vast majority of people were peasants, tied to the land in a system known as manorialism. You would likely be a serf, which meant you were legally bound to the land you worked. You couldn't leave. You couldn't marry. You couldn't do much of anything without the permission of your lord. Your life was not your own. The workday would start at sunrise and end at sunset. It was dictated by the seasons and the agricultural calendar. Plowing, sowing, weeding, harvesting, the tasks were endless and physically demanding. The tools were simple and powered by muscle, scythes, sickles, and heavy plows pulled by oxen. It was backbreaking labor, performed in all weather conditions. And it wasn't just your own small plot of land you had to worry about. A significant portion of your week would be spent working your lord's land for free. This was your rent, your obligation. If you failed to meet it, the consequences could be severe. The sheer physical toll of this life is hard for us to imagine. Minor injuries that we would treat with an antiseptic wipe and a bandage could be a death sentence. A simple cut could become infected, leading to a slow and painful death. There were no antibiotics, no understanding of germ theory. Sickness and injury were a constant threat, and medical care was rudimentary, to put it mildly. So, you've survived the morning, you've navigated the filth, eaten your grim breakfast, and are now toiling in a field under the watchful eye of a reeve. You're cold, you're tired, and you're probably covered in mud. And the day is only just beginning. The afternoon holds its own special set of challenges, from the questionable justice of the manorial court to the ever-present threat of disease. But we'll get to that for now. Just focus on the rhythm of the work, the ache in your back, and the knowledge that this is your life, day in and day out. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? Almost enough to make you drift off to sleep. Almost. And we're back. I hope you're feeling nice and relaxed. Perhaps even a little grateful for your memory foam mattress and your morning coffee. Let's drift back to our medieval peasant, still laboring in the field as the sun climbs higher in the sky. Lunchtime approaches. Don't get too excited. There's no designated lunch break. No art to yourself. You'd likely eat in the field. A quick and simple meal to keep your energy up. More bread, perhaps some cheese, if you have it, and more ale. The diet was not only monotonous, but also nutritionally precarious. While the upper classes might dine on a variety of meats and imported spices, peasants subsisted on a diet heavy in grains and whatever vegetables they could grow in their small garden plots. Fresh fruit and vegetables were seasonal, and winters could be long and lean, leading to deficiencies like scurvy. Famine was a very real and recurring danger. A bad harvest due to poor weather could mean starvation for you and your family. People would be reduced to eating bark and berries to survive. Food safety was another matter entirely. Without refrigeration, preserving food was a constant challenge. Salting, smoking, and drying were the primary methods, but spoilage was common. People relied on their sense of smell, sight, taste to judge if food was safe to eat. But this was far from a perfect system. Foodborne illnesses like dysentery, known as the flux, were rampant and often deadly, especially for the very young and the elderly. Contaminated food and water were a constant source of sickness. Let's say you make it through the afternoon without succumbing to food poisoning. As you work, you might see the lord of the manor ride by on his horse, perhaps on his way to go hunting. The social structure was rigid and absolute. You were at the the bottom of a pyramid with the king at the top, followed by nobles, knights, and clergy. You, a peasant, had few rights and countless obligations. You owed your lord not just labor, but also a portion of your own harvest, taxes, and fees for everything from using the lord's mill to getting married. Social mobility was practically non-existent. You were born a peasant, and you would die a peasant. Your children would follow the same path. The idea of moving up in the world was a foreign concept. Your life was defined by the land you were born on and the Lord you served. It was a system designed to keep the powerful in power and the laborers laboring. As the sun begins to set, the workday finally comes to an end. You trudge back to your village, your body aching from a day of physical toil. The evening offers a brief respite, but it's not exactly a time for leisure and entertainment. You might spend some time tending to your own small garden, fixing tools, or spinning wool into thread. These tasks were essential for your family's survival. The village itself would be a small, close-knit community. Everyone knew everyone else's business, for better or for worse. The local church was the center of social life, marking the holidays and festivals that provided rare breaks from the daily grind. These feast days were the only real holidays you would get, a chance to rest, socialize, and enjoy a slightly better meal than usual. But village life wasn't always harmonious. Disputes were common, and the justice system was, let's just say, different. Minor crimes and disagreements were handled by the manorial court, presided over by the Lord Steward. All the villagers had to attend, and a jury of 12 men, chosen by their peers, would decide the verdict. Punishments for minor offenses were often public and designed to shame the offender. You might be put in the stocks or a pillory, where you would be subjected to the ridicule and abuse of your neighbors. People could throw rotten vegetables or even stones at you. For more serious crimes, the punishments were brutal. The goal was to deter others through fear. Mutilation, such as cutting off a hand for stealing, was a common sentence. For the most severe offenses, like murder or treason, the penalty was death. And the methods for determining guilt, they weren't always based on evidence. Before the widespread adoption of trial by jury in the 13th century, there was trial by ordeal. This was based on the belief that God would intervene to show the truth. You might be forced to carry a red-hot iron bar if your hand healed cleanly after 3 days. You were innocent. Or you could be thrown into water. If you floated, you were guilty, as it was believed the pure water was rejecting a sinner. It was a system based on superstition, where your fate was left to chance and divine whim. For noblemen, there was also trial by combat, where you would fight your accuser, often to the death. The winner was deemed to be in the right. It was a brutal and arbitrary system of justice. There was no police force to speak of. If a crime was committed, the villagers were expected to raise the hue and cry, stopping whatever they were doing to chase down the culprit. It was a system of community policing, but its effectiveness was questionable. If the criminal got away, they often escaped justice entirely. As darkness falls, you would return to your hut. The fire would be built up, providing the only source of light and warmth. The family would gather for the evening meal, more pottage, more bread. The evenings would be spent in the smoky confines of your home, perhaps mending clothes or telling stories. There were no books for peasants, as most were illiterate. Finally, it's time for sleep. You settle back down on your straw mattress, the animals rustling nearby. The smoke from the fires still hangs heavy in the air. You're exhausted, but sleep might not come easily. The straw is itchy, the hut is drafty, and the fear of sickness, starvation, or the Lord's displeasure is a constant companion. You've made it through your first 24 hours, but the question is, could you do it again, day after day, year after year? The relentless labor, the poor diet, the lack of sanitation, the constant threat of disease and violence. It was a brutal existence. The average life expectancy was grim. Many children didn't survive past their first year, and for those that did, life was a constant struggle. If you managed to avoid dying from childhood illness, childbirth, or in an accident, you might live into your 40s or 50s, but it was a life worn down by hardship. It's a stark contrast to our modern lives, with our comforts, our conveniences, and our expectation of a long and healthy life. The medieval world was a place of deep faith and strong community. But it was also a world of profound suffering and uncertainty. It was a world where survival was a daily achievement. And as you lie there in your warm, comfortable bed, listening to the gentle hum of your refrigerator, you can be thankful that you're only visiting the Middle Ages in your imagination. It's a fascinating place to explore from a distance, but not a place you'd want to call home now. Let your mind drift away from the smoke and the straw, and let the quiet of the present lull you into a deep and peaceful sleep. Good night.